Welcome to the #1 show and the source of truth for all things MedTech. Here, we reveal the secrets and stories behind the investments, science, and commercialization of the MedTech industry. Every week, we'll take you on a wild ride with the biggest names in the game, from entrepreneurs and investors who are shaking up the market to healthcare providers who are revolutionizing the way we think and practice medicine. So hold on tight and get ready for a journey like no other. This is the State of MedTech. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Another exciting crowdfunding episode. I've been loving doing these crowdfunding episodes mainly because, well, if you're like me, I love medtech, I love startups, and so this is one of those opportunities where you can directly invest in a company and get equity in it without being an accredited investor. But as always, I always have to remind people and warn them that, hey, these crowdfunding investments, they are high risk. Obviously, with high risk comes very high return and reward, but please keep that in mind. The nature of this episode is purely for educational and entertainment purposes. This is not financial advice by any means. So, that being said, let's get right into it. So, I want you to imagine a world where musculoskeletal implants are as strong and durable as diamonds. Okay? So, that actually is possible now because of a company called Dymicron and their game-changing technology. And so the pioneers behind this company, Dr. Bill Pope, a materials science expert, and Bao Nguyen, who's a PhD in biomedical engineer, were essentially united by a vision to revolutionize the spinal implant industry, and they created something really extraordinary. They created what's called Triadyme C, which is Dymicron's diamond-like spinal implant. So essentially, it's made from a polycrystalline diamond, and this implant is a fusion of superior material science and innovative engineering, because these days, a lot of spinal implants over a lot of wear and tear and time sometimes have to be replaced. Right? And with over 65 million Americans suffering from back pain, spinal implants play a critical role in treatment, but traditional implants, as I mentioned, they can wear out or cause complications, and that's where the Triadyme C technology shines. Triadyme C essentially boasts really exceptional durability, biocompatibility, and wear resistance, which means fewer complications, reduced pain, and higher quality of life for patients. Plus, has a very unique design that ensures a perfect fit, right, which minimizes the risk of device-related issues. Now, Dymicron's dedication to this has earned them numerous awards and recognitions. Plus, they boast about 83 patents, which is really exciting. They've secured a little over $60 million in funding and decided to go the route of crowdfunding because, one, it's just another fantastic vehicle to raise money and, more importantly, raise it through the public. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you go check out their website, which is invest.dymicron, spelled Dymicron.com. That's invest.dymicron.com. Again, these are very risky investments, right? I want you to keep that in mind. That being said, let me give you my perspective on what I like about them. Number one is that for any company, I always look for companies that have a very unique angle and potentially can make a category, right? It's the first diamond disc replacement, right? It's the first time that, the material science around polycrystalline diamonds are being used in this way. I love companies like that, because they can essentially create their own category. And when you create your own category, it's very easy to attract early adopters for this, which is what you need to drive mass market adoption for anything. The next thing is they actually have 83 patents, right? So they have a very, very strong patent portfolio, and it makes sense because their founders come from a heavy academic background. They're material scientists, so they they did probably a really good job with having a super tight patent portfolio, which again, these days, if you think about medtech companies, it's very difficult to survive alone. Most medtech companies, if not all of them, are designed to stay private or get acquired or go public and get acquired. So I like that because for strategic, think about Medtronic, Stryker, Zimmer, Globus, the list goes on, right? This could potentially be a great acquisition target for them. And from my perspective, right, they've already done a little over 500 plus successful cases. Now, those are all international cases, but that's, at least for me, when it comes to like an investment, I think it's exciting, right? Just because that says like, hey, there's a lot of potential for their commercial launch to be very successful, especially if there is a lot of interest and demand for this kind of an implant. Again, I want to remind you, this show is not financial advice, is not investment advice, purely for educational and entertainment purposes only. I'm not, a professional investor. I'm just a guy who really loves medtech startups and loves new technology. So on the show today, I have Ted Bird, who's their chief strategy officer, and I'm very proud to say he's also a member of the Medical Sales Network Effects program. I'm very proud of that. He's done a fantastic job telling the story of Dymicron on LinkedIn. So Ted's background is fantastic. He started off early on as a sales associate, but worked his way through the industry at different roles, from product management at Boston Scientific, product director at J&J, and of course, getting his first leadership role as a VP of Global Marketing, Medical Education, and Emerging Technology at Sophomore Danik, which you all recall was one of the most famous acquisitions for Medtronic. That really was a big technology play for Medtronic. From there, he served other leadership roles, such as VP of Field Marketing Strategic Development for Spine over at DePuy, and then spent a significant amount of time, over 7 years, at Orthofix, where he served at various leadership roles, his most recent being the president of Spinal Implants Division. Outside of that, Ted served various leadership roles, from chief commercial officer over at Titan Spine to serving as board member for a variety of different companies due to his experience in the spinal implant industry. So with that being said, here's our episode with Chief Strategy Officer of Dymicron, Ted Bird. And again, be sure to go and read and check out their investment. They will be closing their crowdfunding round soon, I believe in the next month or two. And so you can check them out at invest.dymicron.com. You'll see all the information there. And if you're a clinician, don't forget to unlock your free CME credit. That's right, you get an AMA PRA Category 1 CME credit by listening to this episode. Just listen to the episode, click the link in the show notes below, and then take 10, 15 seconds to write down what you learned and reflect on it and unlock your free AMA PRA Category 1 CME credit. And now let's get on to our episode of Dymicron with Chief Strategy Officer Ted Bird. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back to the State of MedTech, and I have another fantastic company on our equity crowdfunding series. So for many of you who know, I come from the spine world. That's where I started my career, and so it's always exciting to see a new company doing something very different in the space of implants. When it comes to spinal implants, it's one of the most important. It's kind of the bedrock of all spine procedures, but there's a lot of like Me Too companies, Me Too implants, everything. So when something new comes along, I generally get pretty excited about it. Ted Bird's been a friend of mine for a long time from the industry. He's been an industry vet for a while. So he is the chief strategy officer over at Dymicron. So I have him on the show to talk a little bit more about who Dymicron is, and of course, the opportunity to get involved with them. Just as a reminder, Dymicron has a equity crowdfunding campaign going right now. You can find more about them at invest.dymicron, spelled DYMICRON.com. So Ted, thanks for joining the show. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Omar. Thanks for having me on. Excited to chat with you.
Absolutely. And maybe just for context for our audience, like if you can give a quick 30-second high level about you and your background, and kind of dovetail that into like what brought you to Dymicron, because you've been in a lot of different companies. So many people are probably wondering, with somebody with your experience, what attracted you to this opportunity?
Absolutely. So I've been in orthopedics and spine for over 30 years. I mean, actually, orthopedics almost 40 years. So I'm an industry insider. Work for the big companies, the Johnson and Johnsons, the Medtronics, some of the mid-sized companies like Orthofix, publicly traded companies. But more in recent years, smaller startup and emerging technology companies has been my focus. Really enjoy the innovation, helping bring disruptive technology to the marketplace. And that's what brought me to Dymicron a couple of years ago, when a friend of mine who I'd worked with at Medtronic years ago left Medtronic and joined this company in Utah. I asked him to show me the product and the technology. And it was one of those times that we all remember in our career where you're stopped in your tracks and you look at it and say, wow, that's different. Tell me more. How can I help? And that's what brought me to this company based on the space they're in and the unique technology they have.
Got it. Now, before we get into the technology, and it is very interesting tech, um, why did you guys choose to go the equity crowdfunding route versus the more traditional route where you raise money from like institutional investors or venture capitalists or strategics? Why equity crowdfunding?
That's a great question, Omar. And I really just learned about equity crowdfunding, this new channel for capital fundraising, a couple of years ago at the LSI meeting in Dana Point, California, where the Congress, the US government had changed the rules for this uh, venue for private companies to raise money online, and they raised the cap ceiling limits for private companies. And someone was educating me on that without being SEC qualified, they raised it from $1 million a year up to 5 million. And for an SEC qualified online raise, from 10 million to 75 million a year. Pretty significant amount of capital. And you can go to unaccredited investors and get your story. And so I became a student. I started to look at the space, followed the companies that were in the space, and there weren't that many medtech companies. It's still today fairly early for medtech. But the reason why I was interested and convinced the board of directors at Dymicron is because any medtech company that there's two areas of challenge for institutional capital, VCs, private equity, even high net worth family office investors. Spine is a difficult place to raise money. There's been a lot of venture money, institutional capital that has gotten burned in spine in the past. So they have a bit of a leery view of the space. Secondly, if you have a class 3 product that needs to go through a PMA IDE study, that timeline and that risk profile is not well suited, at least to VCs in today's environment. So those are two areas that Dymicron, we have a class 3 product that to get cleared in the US market is going to require a PMA IDE study and being a spine company. So most of the VCs that I talked to in the first year at Dymicron were more oriented towards growth capital. Once you've got a regulatory approval and you want to grow, to take it to the next level and look for an exit within 3 years or less, that was more interesting. So it's a difficult time also in 2022, late 2022, and now in 2023. The current economic and financial environment has turned with inflation going up, with VCs being challenged, with Silicon Valley Bank going out in the beginning of this year. That made it even more difficult. So we started this process a year ago, but clearly the advantages are you get to get out into the marketplace online, which is today's real channel to get the word out on your company, marketing anyway, which is your specialty, Omar. And there's a double benefit of being able to raise money, but also raise your profile as an organization, as a company. And that many times, and this has been proven, will unearth or uncover a potential investor, even an institutional investor that's interested in your space, interested in your tech or implant and company, and may want to partner. So there's kind of double benefit. And a third benefit is individual investors. If the story resonates, many of them have the problem that your company solves with your technology. And so
Right.
you develop a fan base of people that are interested, that know that it's going to solve their problem or a friend or a family's problem, and they become really loyal, really active investors.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the exciting things about equity crowdfunding is, you know, more importantly, is not giving up control of the company, but then also essentially getting you know, a tribe of people who really believe in the product and will help with driving product adoption awareness. So that being said, before we talk about, what the funds are going to be used and everything, let's start with the first, question, which is like, what does Dymicron do? Why is it called Dymicron? What's the problem you guys solve?
Yeah, so the Dymicron story is very interesting. It started with the founder, who was not in the medtech space, who was a biomaterials expert, a university professor at BYU, who invented the process to produce man-made diamond, or better known as polycrystalline diamond, and to create a manufacturing process to produce this material, reliably. So he invented this material, this process to develop it and to form different products, and was very, very successful in the mining, deep earth mining space. So he and his colleagues, started several very successful companies that put tungsten carbide drill bits in deep earth mining out of business, and made a lot of money in that space. Moved or pivoted to medtech and created Dymicron based on a neighbor telling him that he was going to the hospital to get a artificial hip replaced, a revision operation. And he didn't know much about, orthopedics or about med tech or hips, but he said, he's an entrepreneur. So the light bulb went on. He's like, if I made your hip out of my diamond material, you would never have to go back for another operation. So that became his driving purpose and vision, to create orthopedic implants that would never, the patient would never have to go back for a revision as long as everything else went well, surgical technique, the surgeon, picked the right patient, etc. But it wouldn't be a failure because of the material. So Omar, he started in hips, and they developed a total hip initially, and then pivoted to spine about 10 years ago, when he was introduced to a PhD spine engineer that had developed a unique biomechanical articulating design for the implant, which is a 3-lobe in 3 pockets articulation. Very different than a typical ball and socket, articulation that we all are used to seeing in either a knee or a hip. And that combination of the trilobe, which is a much more natural motion profile, more similar or mimicking the normal anatomic disc than a ball and socket or other, design that's available today, combined with the polycrystalline diamond that you can't produce wear debris on. No matter how hard we've tried, you just can't. It'll last for 10 million cycles or more in the testing, which is 400 plus human years of normal daily living. So it's going to, statement I use is, last beyond a patient's lifetime. And that's what it's all about. It solves a material problem, and it solves an engineering or design problem.
Interesting. And so just to kind of repeat that back, so like the materials problems that you guys use, that polycrystalline diamond, which is man-made diamond, so it's extremely tough. It's not going to need to be replaced. So, for people who are new to spine surgery, that does happen where the discs or the implants do need to be replaced because of wear and tear. Is that correct?
That's correct. Now, artificial discs in the spine are fairly new. They're really only been around the last 15 years or so. So, generally the materials used today, ultra or plastics and metals or ceramics, might last, longer than the time that these products have been out so far. But there have been problems of these materials coming apart, or the design of the implant coming apart and creating what's called osteolysis, which is the body's reaction when these polyethylene plastics are exposed, and debris, wear debris that does occur, gets into the body. Osteolysis creates inflammation that then leads to loosening of the implant. This is very common in hips and knees that have been around much longer, 50 years plus. And so in the total knee or total hip business, people in the industry refer to it as, oh yeah, you need to go in for an oil change. It's time to get your hip replaced or your knee replaced. Well, that was something that Dr. Pope, who founded Dymicron, just didn't like. He's like, why should a patient have to go back for a surgery? No one wants to go for a surgery in the first place. Why go back for a second one? So that's what, the problem that's being solved is wear debris, as well as the design that is not complicated, that doesn't have too many parts that could come apart, and it's going to last forever.
And that's where that trilobe design comes in, correct?
Correct. The Trilo, both simplistic design, but stable. The motion profile, as analyzed by the top biomechanical labs in the world for orthopedics, show that the the motion profile of the trilobe is much more similar to a normal anatomic spinal disc than a more traditional ball and socket, or other designs that have lots of different moving parts. And anytime you design something with moving parts, there's more moving parts. There's more that can fail and come apart, and come apart in the body, which is not a good thing.
Got it. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, and actually here, for those who are watching on YouTube and Spotify, you'll be able to see my screen shortly. But I'm going to bring up an image of that trilobe design just so you can see it. So why were implants designed any other way?
Well, I think, Omar, it was just that that's the way that the tradition and the experience in orthopedics, and that's often the way in our industry, is just incremental improvements off of what the history was in other spaces, like other total joints in orthopedics. So
Got
the
it.
first artificial disc are, in fact, one of the biggest companies in the world today in spine, and not so much in orthopedics, but in spine, is Medtronic, which you and I both
Right.
worked for.
Hmm.
And their artificial disc is actually a metal on metal ball and socket design. So you scratch your head and say, well, how would I want to have that in my disc or my family member's disc? Its results are good. It works well, but it's also well known that there's going to be wear properties in that product. If you look at the image you just put up there in the spine, you can see that the Dymicron disc has a portion of it, the articulating portion right there. The black portion is the polycrystalline diamond. Above that is actually a cobalt chrome, and above that, with the two keels, is a titanium with titanium plasma spray. That part is in the bone of the vertebrae of the spine, so that's not articulating, but that holds the product in a press fit manner without bone cement or anything like that, um, which is used in hips and knees, but to hold it in place while the product design of the three lobes articulates very naturally.
Got it. Got it. And one of the things you have here on your investment page is that you guys have, first of all, you've implanted in 500 plus patients already, which is great. So you guys are past are you guys FDA cleared then here in the United States?
We are not FDA cleared yet. We are
Okay.
cleared in Europe. So the
Ah,
regulatory
okay.
body is the CE mark, and Dymicron actually got the first, clearance through CE mark for Europe 8 years ago. So 2014, they got it. And people in the industry kind of know that in Europe they changed the rules or guidelines for having that approval, that CE mark approval. In about 2017, they made it they tried to make it more difficult to get a CE mark and to maintain your CE mark. So for that reason, many companies kind of withdrew or decided not to continue to focus on the European market because of the cost and the difficulty of either getting your first CE mark or maintaining your CE mark. So Dymicron actually lost their notified body, which is your representative in Europe, in that process, because about 80% of all of those agents that were helping small medtech companies or any medtech company get into CE mark went out of business. So that became very difficult. And so Dymicron started their first case in December of 2014, but in a very controlled way, has been selectively at special identified centers, primarily in Germany and now in Spain, implanting the product, not just selling the product in order to drive top line growth, but to validate the clinical success of the product and the market acceptance of the product. And so there's a long history. In fact, I met with the very first patient who was a US citizen who had it done in December of 2014 last month. I tracked him down, lives in Colorado now, and was operated on by a U.S. surgeon that was operating at an ambulatory surgery center in Cyprus that a group of
Oh, yeah,
U.S.
right, right,
surgeons
close to
owned.
Turkey. Yeah.
Right. So his college roommate actually became an orthopedic spine surgeon and advised him. He had learned about the man-made diamond disc. Said, I can tell you, you do need to have surgery. You do need to have an artificial disc, definitely recommend motion versus fusion. Get a disc
Hmm.
instead of getting fused. And I can help you. I'll introduce you to the company because I know surgeons that own this are part owners in the surgery center. But I would recommend you fly to Cyprus and get this diamond disc as opposed to what we have today. And
Mm,
so that's what he did. And he's doing great. The great part of the story is that he is a healthcare professional. He actually runs an ambulatory surgery center in Colorado. So he knows, the questions to ask, the people to look for, and this is the choice that he took. The great news is last month he's doing fantastic. So
that's
I'm going to
fantastic.
be doing a patient testimonial video with him soon. And 8 years out, he's out and about in Colorado with his family and his kids doing the active things that people that want to keep their motion are able to do.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And it's nice to see, I mean, at least from an investment standpoint, you guys have 83 patents. So again, like, back in the day, it was easier in medtech. Right now, medtech companies, I think, they're designed to do one of two things, whether it's implant or robotics or anything else, is to launch and then go public, IPO, and then get acquired, or stay private and get acquired. And for you guys, aside from like a very unique design and materials structure, you have 83 patents, and so that's really good to hear. And what do you know when your patent cliff is? Which is, for the audience, that's usually when the patent ends.
Yeah, so we've kept the patent portfolio very robust, and that was a priority for the founder because he was a university professor. IP was very important to him, so they continued to keep that strong. The cliff is still good for at least another 10 years, but what's also unique about what we have at
Great.
Dymicron is the proprietary manufacturing process. This is not a process that someone's going to be able to duplicate. It's a very, very specific process that's been developed and refined over the years. And it's an incredible um, process to take. Diamond powder is how it starts, with diamond powder and then various layers of different materials that are put into a mold and then pressed with this huge press that's about 60 tons in weight, about 9 foot tall, 9 foot deep, 9 foot wide, and that applies 1,000,000 pounds per square inch at 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit over 4 minutes. And so this diamond, everything melts together. The cobalt chrome, the titanium, and the polycrystalline diamond into one form factor that then is spit out of the press, and then polished to finish every 4 minutes. So it's not something that we machine together. It's uh, it's something that someone's not going to just, even in China, go and recreate very very easily.
Yeah. And, just on the market size, so, you guys have listed that, essentially a better disc replacement would be worth $1 billion because degenerative disc disease is the second most common reason to visit the doctor behind, of course, the common cold. And then artificial cervical discs are the fastest growing segment of the spine market. So a functional, lasting solution to this problem has definitely massive market potential. So again, just reading off your site, and you guys have references for this. Again, if you're interested in these data points and some of the more information, just go to invest.dymicron.com. So, $1 billion global cervical market, right, with 800,000 cervical implant procedures. So, you guys essentially are looking more on the cervical side versus, say, thoracic and lumbar. But do you have products that can start moving more into thoracic and lumbar areas, or is it mainly cervical?
Is primarily cervical, and that's a matter of focus, Omar. For the company, it's a small company, 17 full-time employees, but the application and potential for lumbar and the low back, where the rest of the motion preservation market in spine is there, particularly the trilobe. But even more exciting is the other areas of orthopedics. Think about total ankle, back to total knees,
Ah,
total
so
hips.
that makes it a much more interesting acquisition target for like these larger strategics, whether it's Stryker, Medtronic, or Zimmer, or anybody else, because essentially they can acquire the IP and then apply it to these other areas, right? So that IP
Yes.
portfolio actually expands based on that.
It does, and part of that IP is applications across the entire human body for polycrystalline diamond and the form and the factor of this material. So
Yeah, and that trilobe design, do you guys have a utility patent on that trilobe design?
we do. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Because I'm one, the just thinking about it. Of course, like, so one thing I like about this, you know, I like companies that are hyper focused because when you're hyper focused, you're able to drive adoption much faster and then have customer success. Um, One of the concerns I had for you guys is like, okay, are they going to be doing this thing where you're going the whole spine, right? Because once you get into the thoracic, especially the lumbar area, I mean, you're dealing with a lot, like really massive companies. That's their bread and butter, and they're not going to just let you walk in and just take their business from them. But the cervical area is kind of underserved, and and again, it's growing. So I like that you guys have this focus there. That's your beachhead to conquer. But then essentially, if a company were to acquire you guys or partner with you, they're able to expand to all these areas like that trilobe design. Again, I haven't worked in the knee space or articulating joints, but I would imagine that trilobe design, if it's dealing with the cervical spine, which requires a lot of movement, right, and articulation, that would be really good for things like wrist, ankles, knees. I would imagine as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You think about upper extremity, like you said, wrists, metacarpal joints, lower extremity, ankle, where there's a lot of force and pressure, and you want stability. And one of the things that the trilobe provides is a self-centering, super stable, structure. And in the neck, a ball and socket, uh, still puts pressure and forces on the facets, which is another joints associated with every single spinal joint has got a couple of different facet joints, and then you've got all the ligaments. So you want to take the
Hmm.
pressure off of those, and the trilobe does that, and has a motion profile with the center of rotation being dynamic and more natural to the normal center of rotation of where an anatomic disc is. So that's the beauty of it. And cervical spine is the one of the fastest growing areas because it can be done in an ambulatory surgery center. So it's a simple procedure versus lumbar disc. You have to partner. A spine surgeon has to partner with a vascular surgeon to do because it's an anterior approach primarily. There are some
Mm,
other companies today looking at coming at it from a posterior or lateral approach,
right,
but
right, right.
anterior approach is going to require partnership with another surgeon, and that's a hospital-based procedure, not an ambulatory surgery base. That's where
Got
the
it.
market is
Got it.
going, and very quickly today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, the thing that COVID really drove was if you can't have care delivered at home, you want it to be very close by. And even for me, I just went to the American Academy of neurosurgeons this weekend in LA, and even some of these, you know, more, like they're, again, this is neurosurgery, and a lot of the companies I spoke with are focusing a lot on being able to service adoption in these ambulatory surgery centers because people don't want to drive to the city. And even if they can, like, they just, not everybody can afford to do that, because when you go into the city, like, you have to get a hotel, there's all these things, it's very difficult on the patient, right? And so if it's not being done at home, like these ambulatory surgery centers, which service a much larger population, right? I think there's like, I don't know, 15,000 hospitals in the United States, but there's like 120 150,000 ASCs,
Yes.
which is a much, much bigger market. So let's talk about the investment side. So I
Yeah.
see on your website you guys are your offerings at $5.75 a share. What's the minimum investment?
The minimum investment is $1,000, Omar. So at $5.75, that's 174 shares. These are common shares, common equity, non-voting shares, and the value is at that point today. But as we grow and our milestones are achieved, like getting into the FDA study, and we're in the discussions right now with FDA. We've already got a round of questions on our first study. Once that happens, the value is going to go up. So now is a great time to invest in Dymicron at the front end of our study, and at the kind of still the front end, I consider, of our international commercialization efforts, because we're now getting a lot of interest from other markets that will recognize the CE mark. Places
Hmm.
like Australia, places like areas in Asia, and even in South America, where selectively we're going to pick the best of the best surgeons and sites but there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue to grow. So now's a great time to invest and partner with us. We're looking to partner with equity crowdfund investors because you will be part of this story going forward as we achieve our mission of getting as many of these uh, innovative discs into needy patients as possible around the world and ultimately in the right hands. And in the right hands means a company like a Medtronic, a Stryker that has the commercial infrastructure to gain more market share than Dymicron could do by ourselves. But that's where an investor is going to see a return once these companies, which do not even have an artificial disc today, like Johnson and Johnson, if you can believe it, do not have an artificial disc. Stryker does not even have an artificial disc today. Medtronic, as I mentioned earlier, has one of the very first generation discs of metal on metal. So as this market continues to grow and go beyond $1 billion, these companies need, and we know because I know them all. I worked at most of them, are interested in this market and in what we're doing at Dymicron.
Got it. Yeah, and let's just talk, just as we kind of wrap things up, a little bit about the investment. So, first of all, like, how much are you guys trying to raise? And then once you finish that raise, what are the funds going to? I know that you guys are ending your raise, I think, in the next month or two. So, when does the raise close? And then when you finish the raise, what are you going to use the funds for?
Yeah, so right now we haven't set a close date, but we're looking to do it this summer. And here we are looking at May, right around the corner next week, and or in 2 weeks. So the timing is coming to a close. We're looking to raise 15.8 million, and this is our first time out in a Regulation A equity crowdfund. The primary use of funds is for the FDA studies. These FDA studies are quite expensive, and to gain the most value for Dymicron, we plan to do two studies, one for a single level application of the disc, and a second study is required for 2 levels. So each of those studies will be roughly $20 million cost uh, each. So we're being conservative and going out with our first raise at 15.8, just under 16 million, to confirm that this is a viable way for us to attract investors, and we're excited. So far, we've gotten a great response, a lot of interest. We've got dozens of investors already signed up and invested and a lot of people excited about reinvesting and coming in further before the valuation goes up.
Got it. And then, what are some of the milestones and value inflection points that you see for Dymicron?
I think the primary ones, Omar, are uh, getting the green light from the FDA to start the study, and then initiating those U.S. clinical results is the second one. We are fortunate in that we have the support of some of the best known spine surgeons in the world that are here in the U.S. to be our study leaders. The co-lead investigators are Dr. Rick Geyer from the Texas Back Institute in Dallas and Dr. Pierce Nunley from the Louisiana Spine Institute. These are two surgeons that have participated in most of the other disc arthroplasty, artificial disc trials. And then a third site is in our backyard in Salt Lake City, where the company's headquartered, Dr. Armin Kachaturian, who is recognized world over as a disc arthroplasty expert and works at both in Salt Lake City and an ambulatory surgery center in Park City, Utah. So those will be our first three sites. These guys are excited to participate, to be involved in the next generation design. And again, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, Omar, this is not just an idea and a napkin sketch. This is something that has over 500, now over 600 actually, discs that are in place in Europe, some of them over 8 years now, doing well. And so we just need to get into the US market, which is the biggest market in the world. And there's a lot of interest by US patients that are suffering from cervical degenerative disc disease that are calling me, sending the company emails saying, I want to be part of the trial. Some of them asking, where can I go in Europe to get a disc? I'm willing to pay.
Mhm.
How do I do it?
Interesting. Yeah, and this whole the whole world of, I wouldn't call it concierge medicine. I can't, but essentially, it's
Medical
the name,
tourism. Yeah.
medical tourism. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's becoming more popular. Like even me, I have very good health insurance, but there's certain things where, um, care, access to certain technology is just going to be better. So for me, I've just like last year, there was a couple things that I actually went out of pocket for just because the quality is going to be better and I didn't have to wait. So
Yeah.
I think more and more patients are taking, they're educating themselves and they're using the internet to learn more about these different procedures and get access to them outside of the U.S. Last thing I kind of want to wrap up with is, this is one of the more important questions is, what can it, so if somebody listening to the show goes and invests $1,000 in Dymicron, for example, so the minimum investment is $1,000.
Yeah.
There is, and then after that, is there a limit?
No, there's no limit. There's no limit. The platform, the transfer agent we use is a company called Dealmaker. So when you go to the
Got it.
invest.dymicron site, you'll be introduced to the Dealmaker site where they have a questionnaire to walk you through the investment. And there's different levels of investment. So you could do 1,000 is the minimum, but you can go. We've got investors that have put in as much as $30,000.
Got it. And you can be, the nice thing about these equity crowdfunding platforms that you don't have to be an accredited investor. You can just be like, this is just like this is like Kickstarter, except for MedTech,
Right.
So, my last, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ted.
No, I was going to say Kickstarter. I react to it because the board of directors at Dymicron, when I mentioned the idea of doing crowdfunding,
They
they
thought
generally,
Kickstarter.
like most people, didn't understand crowdfunding. They thought, is this Kickstarter? Is this like GoFundMe for medical devices? I said, no, this has now become actually a pretty sophisticated way for private companies to raise money, and the U.S.
Yeah.
government and the SEC are supporting it. So last year alone, 2022, some of the stats, there was over almost $2 billion was raised through equity crowdfunding, whereas it was only 8 years earlier, maybe just over 100 million. That
Right.
pales in comparison to the amount that was raised through venture capitalists, which is $500 billion. But it's a start. Equity
It's a start. Yeah.
crowdfunding is
And
becoming a thing.
yeah, and I think a lot, especially for medtech, there's certain companies like Monogram Orthopedics, they raised $20 million. I think a lot of companies prefer to go this route because you're not giving up control of your company. You're not getting bullied by VCs, right, in terms of your valuation. And hypothetically, I mean, you essentially have an army of marketers and salespeople who believe in the product. We're going to talk about it and everything. So, like, it's a great way to get traction in your commercial launch. Uh, Last question for you is, realistically, somebody invests $1,000, what can they expect in terms of the timing and size of their return, just conservatively speaking?
Yeah, conservatively. We've looked at when setting our valuation comparable deal values in spine and orthopedic acquisitions. So over the past 5 to 6 years, you look at all the list of companies that have been acquired for spine and generally orthopedics. The average M&A size of those deals is around of like companies is around 300 million, and the median average is actually 500 million, and the median is about 300 million.
Hmm.
So there's a 3 to 5x return for a disruptive, innovative technology that is really helping people. So it's kind of an impact play, particularly for investors that suffer from degenerative disc disease or have family members that do. And the time frame is, again, it's a 3 to 5 year. It's going to take us 5 years to get the FDA study done and completed. But once the US clinical results are in play and looking good on top of the international results, there is the likely potential for a transaction to occur such that a strategic doesn't want to miss out on a truly leading next generation product.
Got it. Got it. That's fantastic. Yeah, and it makes sense to, at least from what I've seen, a lot of these larger companies like Baxter's a great example. But same with like Stryker and Medtronic, they're doing less of these big transformative deals, which are in the billions of dollars, looking more into these tuck-in deals where they can acquire technology, $500 million or less, that's going to tuck into their core business. And so, I think it makes a lot of sense based on the market. The technology seems to be great. It's great that you guys have a fantastic patent portfolio. And it was very interesting to hear that even like J&J, I didn't realize that they don't have a product like this in their portfolio. And they're one of the biggest med tech companies on planet Earth. I mean,
Yeah.
after Medtronic, but still, like if you include J&J's pharma division, like they are the largest med tech company.
Yep. And then you consider all the emerging players. The fastest market share growers in spine today are public companies like Alphatech.
Yeah,
You've got,
Alphatec's taken off. Yeah.
they're taking off. They told Wall Street that they're going to be at almost $500 million in sales this year, and that's incredible. They don't have a motion preservation product. And then there's a lot of private equity owned companies, like CoreLink, like Zavation, like Spinal Elements, that all are looking to be a factor in the marketplace and grow, and not just by having a robot and something else, but having a play in the fastest growing implant segment of the market. And then there's the international companies. There's some Asian companies that have not really ever been successful in the U.S. market, but there's a lot of very wealthy, well-financed international companies that want to have an impact in the U.S. market. And in fact, part of doing a equity crowdfund and doing the online marketing brings, again, your awareness of your company and your technology to the marketplace. And we're already getting inquiries from new strategics that I didn't even think about.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I like, so I like the tech. I like what you guys are doing. And then more importantly, I actually think in a way it's kind of a good thing that you guys aren't commercial yet in the US, because I think, seeing that you're getting traction in the international markets in Europe and other places, if you guys stay the course, I don't think it would be too far-fetched to think that you put enough pressure on the market that strategic comes and acquires you guys right before you go in your commercial launch here in the US. So that's fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
Ted, really appreciate you coming on the show. And for those listening again, couple reminders. Number one, if you're a clinician, be sure to go and click the link below. Unlock that continuing medical education credit. Just 30 seconds. Write down what you learned from the episode. And for any of you who are interested in investing in Dymicron, I really recommend you go and read their investment page. So you can go to that at invest.dymicron.com. So I'm Omar Khateeb, your host of the State of MedTech, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of the State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review, because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has a executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@khateebandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.